In the first days, it felt like kindness, people wanting to help, people wanting to make sure he was safe, people wanting him to know that Naples would take care of him. But kindness, when it never stops, starts to feel like something else. Diego Maradona had been in Naples for 3 months. The love hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown stronger. Every time he stepped onto the pitch, 75,000 people screamed his name. Every time he touched the ball, the entire stadium held its breath. Every time he scored, grown men cried. This was what he'd wanted. This was what he'd been searching for since leaving Argentina. A place where he mattered. A place where people understood him. A place where he wasn't just a player. He was part of something bigger. But somewhere in those first few months, something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. There was no moment where everything changed. No argument, no confrontation, no threat. It was quieter than that. It was the way certain people started appearing in his life without ever being invited. Naples in the 1980s wasn't like other cities. It had its own rules, its own rhythms, its own way of doing things. In the north of Italy, in Milan, in Turin, in Rome, the government ran the city. The police enforced the law. Businesses operated through banks and legal contracts. But in Naples, power didn't come from the government. It came from the Camorra. This wasn't a secret. Journalists wrote about it. Politicians acknowledged it. Historians documented it. For over a century, the Camorra had controlled the ports, the construction industry, the markets, deciding who got permits, who got contracts, who succeeded, and who failed, woven into the daily reality of southern Italy as both visible presence and understood structure. And when Maradona arrived, when 75,000 people came to the stadium to welcome him, they saw an opportunity, not to hurt him, not to exploit him in some obvious, brutal way, but to keep him close, to make sure he stayed, to make sure he understood that Naples wasn't just a city, it was a family. And in a family, everyone has a role. At first, the help was subtle. A reservation at a fully booked restaurant would appear out of nowhere. A traffic ticket would disappear before Maradona even knew it existed. A problem with his apartment lease would be quietly resolved overnight. Maradona didn't ask for these things. They just happened. And when he thanked people, they smiled and waved it off. "You're Diego Maradona," they'd say. "Of course we help you." It felt good. It felt like respect. It felt like the kind of treatment a person dreams of, being valued, being appreciated, being taken care of. But after a while, Maradona started to notice patterns. The man who fixed his reservation wore the same expensive watch as the one who cleared his parking violations. They nodded to each other across crowded rooms. They made phone calls that solved problems within hours. They moved through the city with a quiet confidence that came from knowing they didn't need to announce who they were. An invisible web of connections Maradona couldn't quite see, but could feel, always present, always just out of direct view. One evening, Maradona went to dinner with a few teammates. It was late. The restaurant was small, tucked into a narrow street in the old part of the city. The kind of place locals went to, not tourists. Halfway through the meal, a man approached the table. He was in his 50s, gray hair, expensive suit. He looked like someone who owned things, someone who made decisions. He smiled at Maradona. "Signor Maradona," he said, his voice calm and respectful. "I hope you're enjoying your meal?" Maradona nodded. "Yes, thank you. It's excellent." "Good. the man said. "If you ever need a table here, just call. We'll make sure there's always a place for you." "That's very kind," Maradona said. The man's smile widened slightly. "It's not kindness. It's respect. You've given this city something it hasn't had in a long time. Hope. We want to make sure you're comfortable here, that you feel at home." Maradona thanked him again, and the man walked away. One of his teammates leaned over. "You know who that was?" Maradona shook his head. "He's connected," the teammate said quietly. "High up. People listen when he speaks." Maradona didn't ask what that meant. He didn't need to. He was starting to understand. The thing about protection is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a contract or a handshake or a verbal agreement. It just starts happening. And once it starts, it becomes normal. Within a few months, Maradona stopped being surprised when problems disappeared. He stopped questioning why certain people always seemed to know where he was going before he'd even decided. He stopped wondering why doors opened for him that stayed closed for others. The city had invested in him, not just emotionally, but financially. The club had spent a record fee to bring him from Barcelona. Local businesses had poured money into sponsorships. The Camorra, through various channels, had made sure the deal went through smoothly. This wasn't charity. This was strategy. Maradona was good for the city. He brought hope, he brought pride, he brought attention. And as long as he stayed, as long as he played well, as long as he kept the fans happy, everyone benefited. The club sold tickets. The businesses thrived. The city felt alive again, and the people who had made it all possible expected him to remember that. But help, when it's constant, starts to create expectations. No one told him this. No one sat him down and explained the rules. No one handed him a list of things he needed to do in return. But he felt it anyway. It was in the way people looked at him when he made decisions. It was in the tone of certain conversations. It was in the quiet disappointment when he didn't show up to an event or when he chose to spend time with the wrong people. There were no threats, no warnings, no consequences spelled out. Just a feeling that his choices weren't entirely his own anymore. He adjusted because in Naples, this was how things worked. You didn't have to ask for help. If you mattered, help came to you. And Maradona mattered more than anyone. One afternoon, a few months into his first season, Maradona was invited to a private event. He didn't know who was hosting it. His agent had simply told him it would be good to attend. Important people would be there. So he went. The event was held in a villa outside the city. Marble floors, chandeliers, the kind of place that whispered old money and old power. When Maradona arrived, he was greeted warmly. Drinks were offered. Introductions were made. Everyone was polite, gracious, complimentary. But as the evening went on, he started to notice something. Every person he spoke to had a connection to the Camorra. Not openly, not obviously. But the signs were there. The way others deferred to them. The way younger men stepped aside when they entered a room. The way they knew private details, quiet decisions, conversations that had happened behind closed doors. At one point, a man approached him. Older, well-dressed, calm. His presence carried weight without effort. "Signor Maradona," the man said, "we're very proud of what you're doing for this city." "Thank you," Maradona said. "The people love you," the man continued. "And we want to make sure that love lasts. We want to make sure you're happy here, that you have everything you need, that nothing distracts you from what you do best. Maradona nodded. I appreciate that. The man smiled. Good, because when you're happy, the city is happy. And when the city is happy, everyone benefits. The fans, the club, the businesses, the families, everyone. There was nothing threatening in his tone, nothing aggressive, but the message was clear. Your happiness matters, not just to you, to all of us, and we're going to make sure it continues. Maradona left the event that night feeling strange, not scared, not angry, just aware. Aware that the love Naples had for him came with responsibilities he hadn't agreed to. Aware that the protection he received wasn't optional. Aware that the people who helped him expected something in return, even if they never said it out loud. They expected him to stay. They expected him to play well. They expected him to keep the city happy. And they expected him not to ask too many questions. He thought about it as he drove back to his apartment. The dark streets, the flickering streetlights, the occasional figure standing on a corner watching as his car passed. Was this normal? Was this just how life worked in Naples? Or was something else happening? He didn't have an answer. And the more he thought about it, the more he realized he didn't want to ask. Because asking meant acknowledging something he wasn't ready to acknowledge. That the city he loved, the city that had welcomed him with open arms, might also be holding him in a way he couldn't escape. By the end of his first season, the watchers had become part of the background. The men on street corners near his apartment, the men in cafes across from the training ground, the men at restaurants, at clubs, at private events, always at a polite distance, but never far away. He didn't think about them anymore. He didn't wonder who they were or why they were there. There's a comfort in acceptance, a relief in not having to question everything, a certain peace in letting things be. Maradona found that peace. He stopped resisting. He stopped wondering. He stopped trying to figure out where the boundaries were. He played football. He lived his life. He let the city take care of him. In Naples, this was normal. This was how people showed loyalty. This was how family worked. And Maradona, whether he realized it or not, had become part of it. One night, late after a match, he stood at his apartment window, looking out at the city. The lights of Naples stretched out below him. Beautiful, chaotic, alive. The kind of view that made you feel like you were standing on top of the world. And on the street, 4 floors down, parked under a streetlight, was a black car. Engine off, windows dark, someone inside. Watching? Maradona stared at it for a long time. He thought about calling someone, asking who it was, why they were there. But he didn't, because he already knew the answer. They were there for him, to protect him, to make sure nothing happened to him, to remind him, without saying a word, that he wasn't alone. He would never be alone again. And then he turned away. Protection doesn't ask permission, it simply assumes you'll accept it. And once you accept it, walking away becomes harder than staying. Maradona had come to Naples to escape the pressure of Barcelona, to escape the politics, to escape the feeling that he was being controlled by people who didn't care about him as a person, only as a player. But control doesn't always look like control. Sometimes it looks like love. Sometimes it looks like family. Sometimes it looks like people who want to help, people who care, people who understand you. And by the time you realize what it really is, you're already part of it. You're already expected to stay. already expected to perform, already expected to be grateful. There's a difference between being loved and being needed. When you're loved, people want you to be happy. When you're needed, people want you to stay useful. And in Naples, Maradona was starting to realize he wasn't just loved, he was needed. By the fans, by the club, by the city, by the people who had invested money, reputation, and power into making sure he succeeded. And needs, unlike love, don't let go easily. Needs hold on. Needs create obligations. Needs turn freedom into expectation. Maradona had wanted to be needed. He had wanted to matter. He had wanted to feel like he belonged somewhere. And Naples had given him exactly that. But belonging in a city like Naples came with a cost he was only beginning to understand. In the months ahead, Maradona would learn what happens when gratitude turns into obligation, when presence turns into pressure, when love becomes something you can't walk away from, even when you want to. But for now, he was still adjusting, still believing that Naples was different, still believing that the protection he received was genuine, unconditional, freely given, still believing that he was free. He wasn't, he just didn't know it yet, because in Naples, freedom was never really free. It was borrowed, it was temporary, it was something you had until the city decided otherwise. And the city, through its people, through its power structures, through its unspoken rules, had already decided. Maradona belonged to Naples now, not as a prisoner, not as a victim, but as family. And family in Naples was forever. If this story left an impression on you, liking the video is enough. For future episodes, you can subscribe.